Chapter 987. Chu Xiangnan had always said whatever was on his mind and did not know what taboo to avoid. However, when Chu Xiangnan spoke the truth openly, everyone present was completely dumbfounded by his words. What? What? The other 6 members of Team Monarch could not defeat Yun Jian even if they worked together? Which one of the members of Team Monarch was not several times more powerful than their peers? Otherwise, they would not have been selected by Gu Junjian to join the military. The military was not a place where any ordinary person could join. More importantly, the other 6 members of Team Monarch had also become members of the Advanced Special Forces. It was the dream of countless Special Forces soldiers to join the Advanced Special Forces, and some might not even be qualified in their entire lives. Therefore, it was safe to say that every member of Team Monarch was an invincible existence to their classmates who could take on all of them alone. However, Chu Xiangnan's words just now completely shocked everyone. Teacher Yu's expression especially changed when she heard Chu Xiangnan mention Yun Jian. Chu Xiangnan's words just now were like a slap to her face. Teacher Yu suddenly felt that what she said just now was rather stupid. It was that statement that a girl like Yun Jian was too weak to enter the military academy. Fang Xiaoran seemed to think that it was not enough after Chu Xiangnan finished speaking. He laughed out loud and said, "That's right, none of us dare to admit it. Yeah, none of us dare to deny that. Forget the fact that the 6 of us can't defeat her. I don't think any of the instructors in our military school are her match either." "What do you mean by probably?" "It's the truth," Chu Xiangnan added with a laugh. If the students present in Teacher Yu's understanding of Yun Jian's strength were only limited to rumors, then at this moment, everyone present received clear confirmation. What kind of status did a military academy's instructor have? To be able to become an instructor in a military academy, one's strength must be on par. However, even a military academy's instructor could not compare to Yun Jian. All the students in the class were stunned. Even Teacher Yu was dumbfounded. "Huh, my master is just that amazing." Zhang Xiaofeng had witnessed Yun Jian kill the number 10 assassin on the international assassin chart, so he spoke with pride. "Let's go, Yun Jian. Let's go to the restaurant. We rushed back this afternoon and I'm starving." Chu Xiangnan patted his tummy that did not have an ounce of fat on it as he led the way with a chuckle. Seeing this, Yun Jian picked up her bag and followed without hesitation, completely ignoring the teacher behind her. Zhang Xiaofeng did not follow. The group of people walked out of the classroom happily, not even sparing a glance at Teacher Yu. Teacher Yu stood there awkwardly. Especially not long after Yun Jian and the others walked out of the classroom, Chu Xiangnan and the others' cheeky conversation could be heard from outside the classroom. "Io, Yun Jian, you don't know. Our school's instructors know that you're going to study at our military academy next semester and they're all fighting over you. They're saying that they'll snatch you to their team no matter what. Isn't that so?" "Ha ha ha, some time ago, they were fighting over which instructor you'd be transferred to next semester. A few instructors even challenged each other in school. Say, this title of yours, it's really too awesome." Chapter 988. Since Miss Yu did not quite believe Yun Jian's words just now, when Chu Xiangnan and the others walked out of the classroom and began their discussion, she purposely hollered at the top of her lungs before they went too far. They were afraid that Miss Yu, who was standing in the classroom, would not hear them. Of course, what Chu Xiangnan and the others said was the truth. When the instructors in the military school heard about Team Monarch Slashing God's achievements and the fact that Slashing God would be transferring to the military school next semester, the instructors in the military school were already fighting over her. They had even gotten into a fight not too long ago. Fortunately, the chief instructor stopped them in the end and it did not lead to any trouble. Of course, with Chu Xiangnan and the others' loud mouths, their voices could be clearly heard by their homeroom teacher, Miss Yu. Miss Yu's astonishment was indescribable. Of course, her classmates were equally stunned on the spot, unable to control themselves. Yun Jian had not even entered the military school and the instructors were already fighting over her. Moreover, Miss Yu had told Yun Jian in a reproachful tone that if she did not study hard or train her skills properly, it would be a problem for a girl like her to even get in due to the high threshold of the military school. But Yun Jian had not even entered the military school and she had already become the most sought-after existence among the instructors. Was it not obvious that Yun Jian was already the default candidate? Miss Yu knew that Yun Jian was Team Monarch/God, but she thought that even if Yun Jian was Team Monarch/God, she should follow the traditional selection method. However, from the looks of it, Yun Jian's entry into the military school was already set in stone. It was no wonder that Yun Jian had only written Min City Military School in her application and was not even willing to write down the target score. It turned out that she was already the default candidate. Miss Yu stood where she was, her face ashen as she listened to the voices of the few people leaving the classroom. Especially what she said just now, compared to what Chu Xiangnan and the others said, was it not a slap to her own face? Ha ha ha, Yun Jian, your teacher is too much. What did I say just now? Ha ha. Chu Xiangnan began to laugh wildly as soon as he walked out of the school gate. Don't say that, I have to give you a thumbs up. Fang Xiaoran grinned and gave Chu Xiangnan a thumbs up. Very strong. Yun Jian curled her lips and gave this comment. The group then walked towards the restaurant with smiles on their faces. When he brought up the matter of the military academy with Chu Ning and the others in the restaurant, Chu Ning gritted her teeth in hatred. The worst thing that happened to me in the military academy was that bunch of arrogant people. They even formed a gang. What's it called again? It's called the Invincible Gang. They even claimed to be the #1 gang in the academy or something like that. Then, they often challenged us, saying that Team Monarch was just a bunch of rookies. I'm so angry. But one of them was really strong. There was once when the 6 of us fought against him alone. Other than Wei Wei, we were all defeated. Even Wei Wei was almost injured. That's why we endured it. Chu Ning said angrily. With that, she scooped up a mouthful of rice with a spoon and chewed fiercely. It was as if the rice in her mouth was that group of people and she could not wait to tear them into pieces. That's right. Chu Xiangnan added angrily. Even so, Chu Ning and Chu Xiangnan did not ask Yun Jian to help them beat up that group of people. Yun Jian smiled and continued, so, in order to fight them, you've been training and turning yourselves black? Chapter 989. Black people, this was a rather vivid comparison. It should be known that before Chu Ning and the rest went to the military academy, although they had plenty of training in the army, their skin was still so fair that it was glowing. What about now? It was not that Yun Jian was exaggerating, but Chu Ning and her friends were tanned. They were almost as tanned as black people and their faces looked like they had been smeared with charcoal. Don't, Yun Jian, we're not as tanned as you're saying, haha. But we've indeed tanned a lot in the past few months. My sunscreen can't block out the scorching sun. Chu Ning exclaimed. After saying that, Chu Ning reached out her hand and rubbed her face hard, as if she could rub the dark skin off her face with this rubbing. You're the most obvious tanned one among us. Chu Xiangnan reached out to pinch a piece of fat on Chu Ning's face before quickly retracting his hand and teasing her with a chuckle. Go away, go away. Are you looking for a beating? I'm talking to Yun Jian, Being pinched by Chu Xiangnan, Chu Ning clenched her fists and gestured at Chu Xiangnan. Alright, stop fooling around, both of you, Jiang Weiwei spoke up, stopping Chu Ning and Chu Xiangnan from fooling around. Sigh, we'll have to go back to the military academy after Labor Day. Yun Jian, don't worry, we'll train well before you come to school. Chu Ning gestured at Yun Jian with her fists clenched and assured Yun Jian confidently. Yun Jian nodded with a squint. Chu Ning and her friend's performance gave Yun Jian a brand new feeling that they were working hard. It was a feeling that Yun Jian appreciated very much. If there were other people, they would have been waiting for Yun Jian to make a move when they saw how capable Yun Jian was. However, Chu Ning and her friends did not. Even if Chu Ning and her friends could not defeat the invincible gang they mentioned, they would not back down. No one was born a powerhouse. Every powerhouse was a heaven-defying existence that had gone through countless trials and tribulations. Chu Ning and her friends took the time to visit Yun Jian before they went home after dinner. They did not have much time on holiday. Other than visiting Yun Jian, they had to report to Gu Junjian that they were safe and go home. After spending a few days with their families, they had to rush back to the military academy. When they bid Yun Jian farewell, Chu Ning hugged Yun Jian for a while. When they were about to leave, Chu Ning turned and took 2 steps before she suddenly thought of something and turned back to look at Yun Jian. "Oh right, Yun Jian, you'll be having your midterm exams in 2 months. Once you're done, won't you have your break 2 weeks earlier than other grades? Why don't you come and play with us after the holidays? We're bored to death at school." Chu Ning stuck out her tongue as she spoke. "Yeah, you're having your summer break 2 weeks earlier than us, so you can come to Min City to look for us." Just as Chu Ning finished, Jiang Weiwei's eyes flickered as she invited Yun Jian. Jiang Weiwei rarely invited others, so Yun Jian turned to look at her the moment she opened her mouth. Although Jiang Weiwei's behavior at the beginning was unpleasant, she had to admit that Jiang Weiwei was very friendly now. Chapter 990. Hearing Yun Jian's promise, Chu Ning and the others were quite happy. Then, Chu Ning and the others went home. Yun Jian had been living quite comfortably recently. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and watched Chu Ning and the others leave. Then, she pursed her lips and smiled slightly. Then, she turned around and prepared to go home. Ever since she was assassinated by Gu Nianji, Yun Jian had been thinking about it. Gu Nianji's words last time were 90% true. As for the other 10%, it still needed to be investigated. But no matter what, Yun Jian believed one of the things Gu Nianji said. That was, in Yulong Continent, her name had already been placed on the billboard. This billboard was not a good ranking. It was a list of assassinations. Yun Jian had already told CE about this. After CE found out about this, he launched a crazy investigation together with the previous assassination. But so far, there was no conclusion. If this had happened on Earth, with An Hun's influence, they would probably be able to find out the truth in an instant. But if it had happened on Yulong Continent, a continent completely unrelated to Earth, then it was hard to say. But with CE's influence, even if it was on Yulong Continent, he would still have a way. But relatively speaking, it might take a little longer. According to CE's words, if anyone dared to assassinate his woman, even if they had to hide in outer space, he would find them and make them suffer a fate worse than death. As soon as she walked into the house, Yun Jian saw a tall figure standing in the house. Yun Jian did not need to look to recognize that this person was Gu Xian. Gu Xian, who had dyed his hair black, was much more handsome than before. He no longer had the red, yellow, blue, and green hair that did not suit him in the first place. With his short black hair, Gu Xian looked a little like a fresh campus boy. Seeing Yun Jian coming in, Gu Xian stood up from the table and strode to Yun Jian, exclaiming in delight, "Sis, you're back?" Yun Jian nodded when she saw Gu Xian and placed her bag on the stool. "Xiao Jian, you just came home? Have you had dinner?" Qin Yiru came out of the kitchen with an apron on and bubbles on her hands, looking like she was washing the dishes with dishwasher. "Yes," Yun Jian answered Qin Yiru and turned to Gu Xian. She waited for Gu Xian to speak. Based on the way Gu Xian looked at her just now, Yun Jian knew that he must have something to tell her. As expected, when Qin Yiru entered the kitchen again, Gu Xian looked at Yun Jian and chuckled foolishly before scratching his head and telling Yun Jian, "Sis, I'm going back to school tomorrow. Do you want to come with me? You have a 3-day break on Labor Day. Since it's near our school, there'll be an international racing competition tomorrow night. It's a rare opportunity, so do you want to come with me, sis?" Chapter 991. Qin Yiru was more at ease now that Yun Jian was going out. Although it was a little dangerous overseas, Qin Yiru could still accept it since Gu Xian would be accompanying her. Leaving without further ado, Gu Xian booked the plane tickets early the next morning and took a flight with Yun Jian to Maryland in Country M at noon. Of the 3 buddies who came back with Gu Xian, other than Shenjia, the other 2 had already returned to Country M. As for Shenjia, He was sent to the hospital after being beaten up by Yun Jian and Ce and had yet to recover. It was impossible for him to go to school in the near future. Of course, Yun Jian was already giving Gu Xian a lot of face by not killing Shen Jia when he kicked Qin Yura back then. Therefore, there were only Yun Jian and Gu Xian on the flight for this trip. Since Ce had returned to Anhun Group, the students in the class were probably buried in their homework during the 3-day holiday of Labor Day. After all, the senior high school entrance examination was just around the corner. In such a tense atmosphere, most of them were struggling with piles of test papers. Except for Yun Jian, of course. Not only did she not stay at home to do her homework, she had even gone overseas. If her classmates knew about this, they would spit out blood. Of course, the whole school knew that Yun Jian did not do her homework. Even the homeroom teacher could not do anything about it. "Sis, are you thirsty?" "I'll get you a drink if you're thirsty," Gu Xian said, afraid that Yun Jian would be thirsty after such a long flight. "I'm not thirsty," Yun Jian replied with a smile and pressed her lips together. "All right," Gu Xian replied with a nod. Yun Jian and Gu Xian set off at noon from Longmen City to Maryland in Country M and arrived at about 3 in the afternoon. However, there was a time difference between Country Z and Country M. It was supposed to be 3:00 in the afternoon in Country Z, but it was almost 8:00 in the evening in Country M's Maryland. The time difference between Longmen City and Maryland was not huge, so Maryland was not the furthest away from Longmen City. Of course, it was already 8:00 in the evening when they arrived in Maryland. At this time, the race was about to start. Car racing was popular in Gu Xian's school, and the real race would only start at night. It could be said that Yun Jian and Gu Xian arrived on time. However, Gu Xian didn't take Yun Jian to the international circuit first. Instead, he took Yun Jian to her school. The university that Gu Xian studied in was a famous one, and it had been a long time since it was founded. Gu Xian was not planning to take part in today's international race. In addition, Gu Xian's current driving skills were not good enough for him to take part in such a race. In spite of this, Gu Xian had rushed back from Country Z to watch today's race enthusiastically. Other than being very interested in the race, there was another reason. He had a buddy who was going to take part. It was an honor for Gu Xian's buddy to be able to take part in an international race that only the world's top racers were qualified to take part in. Although Gu Xian's buddy did not follow Gu Xian to Country Z, he was Gu Xian's best buddy. "Sis, I'll introduce you to some of my buddies later," Gu Xian turned to speak to Yun Jian. They had just finished speaking when they arrived at the entrance of Gu Xian's school. Gu Xian's buddies were all from Country Z. Even if they were studying overseas, they were used to hanging out with people from their own country. When Gu Xian saw the group of people, he was already waving and walking over with Yun Jian. "Hi. My Xiao Xian, you're back." Among the people standing at the school entrance, a burly man came over to Gu Xian with open arms. Chapter 992. This burly man was Gu Xian's best buddy. He was also the one who would be participating in the international racing competition tonight. Therefore, he could be considered to be one of the more popular ones among this group of people. Even in Gu Xian's school, this man's presence was still very strong. It could be said that this man was the role model of the people of Country Z. Of course, in the school, there was no lack of people who saw that Gu Xian was from Country Z. They would wantonly oppress them. Gu Xian's buddy, on the other hand, looked more mature. The man's name was Dan Tianxing, and he was also a senior racer. In his buddy's eyes, Gu Xian was still a virgin who had never interacted with girls before. Not to mention appearing in front of everyone with Yun Jian like today. Therefore, Dan Tianxing felt that it was strange, and that was why he asked that question just now. F***ck off, she's my sister. Gu Xian walked up and directly gave Dan Tianxing a headshot. Of course, it was just a joke between friends. They didn't really fight. "Sister? F***ck, little Xian, I keep feeling that you've changed. Tell me, what did you experience after returning to China? Also, you actually dyed your hair black." Dan Tianqing suddenly reacted. He walked around Guxian a few times and asked loudly. After saying that, Dan Tianqing looked at Yunjian's slender body again. He was shocked and asked Guxian, "And you have another sister? How is it? Isn't this hairstyle cooler than the previous one?" "Huh, also, who can't have a sister? So what if I have another sister? If you have the guts, ask your mother to give birth to another one." Guxian laughed and teased. As he said that, Guxian turned to look at Yunjian. Then, he introduced Dan Tianqing to Yunjian. "Sister, he's just a blockhead. Don't lower yourself to his level. Other than being good at racing, he has nothing else to show off." Haha. Guxian's words made Yunjian smile. Ha ha ha. Dan Tianqing scratched his head, then reached out his hand to Yunjian. "Hello, little Xian's sister." Seeing this, Yunjian didn't reach out her hand. Instead, she nodded and said, hello." Then, Guxian introduced Yunjian to his other buddies. "His name is Wu Dazhuang, his name is Zhu Zilin." Guxian's friends were mostly gangsters. Of course, they were all from country Z. Even if Guxian's friends who came from Z country, he would still make friends with his own countrymen. This was also a principle that was basically Unchanging's principle. After everyone got to know each other, Dan Tianqing said, "Alright, we can go to the racetrack now. My race will start soon." Xian's. There were many female cheerleaders on the racing track or in other kinds of competitions. Therefore, Dan Tianqing wanted Yunjian to be his cheerleader and cheer him on. Yunjian was pretty, so Dan Tianqing thought that if a beautiful girl like Yunjian cheered him on, it would definitely increase his popularity. But just as Dan Tianqing was thinking about this, Guxian suddenly said, "By the way, Tianqing, do you know if there's a way to let someone join the race in the middle of tonight's race?" Guxian wanted Yunjian to participate in the race. However, Dan Tianqing and the others wouldn't consider this at all. Chapter 993. To be honest, with Guxian's ability, if he wanted to participate in the international racing competition tonight, he was still far from enough. The reason why Dan Tianqing could participate in tonight's international racing competition was purely because of his connections. In this day and age, nothing could be done without connections. Dan Tianqing's own strength was quite good. With connections and outstanding strength, it was inevitable that Dan Tianqing would be able to participate. After hearing Guxian's words, Dan Tianqing thought that Guxian wanted to participate in the competition himself, so Dan Tianqing was silent for a while before he spoke again. "Little Xian, if you want to participate in tonight's competition, it's not impossible. I'll see if I can pull some strings and arrange for you to." Before he could finish his words, Guxian immediately interrupted. As he spoke, he pointed at Yunjian and said, "No, I'm not participating. It's my sister. If you can arrange it, you can arrange a race for her." When he was driving Yunjian's Ferrari sports car and almost lost his life due to a brake failure, it was Yunjian who robbed someone else's sports car and saved him. At that time, Yunjian's driving skills had caused an uproar. At that time, Yunjian's driving skills were not as simple as just racing. Guxian was now 100% confident that Yunjian's driving skills were definitely better than his buddy Dan Tianqing's. With such results, it would be a pity if she didn't participate in today's international racing competition. Therefore, Guxian wanted to compete for a spot for Yunjian. However, when Guxian said this, Dan Tianqing and Guxian's other buddies were all dumbfounded. What? My little Xian, are you stupid? Are you out of your mind? Do you know how dangerous racing is? You actually want your sister to participate? You. After Dan Tianqing reacted, he looked at Yunjian in surprise and said to Guxian. However, before Dan Tianqing could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by Guxian. "Tianqing, do you think I'm stupid? Do I look like the kind of person who would harm my sister?" Guxian purposely kept him in suspense. "Little sister, right? Haha." As Guxian spoke, he looked at Yunjian and continued, besides, you must want to participate too, right? After all, today's competition is international. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and smiled. She said indifferently, I'm fine with anything. She had no interest in taking part in the race or not. Yunjian wasn't here for the race. Yunjian came here simply to have a look at Rongyao Company. After all, this was her company from her previous life. Although she had given full authority to the demoness, it was still a company that bore her name. Of course, she could not ignore it. Look, even my sister said she wants to participate. Hurry up and get her a spot. Gu Xian made up a story that Yunjian wanted to participate, and then said to Dan Tianxing with a smile. Little Xian, it's not that I don't believe you, but... You want me to believe that your sister can drive a race car? I really don't believe that. You're a racer yourself. You must know how important it is to be a racer. It's not that I'm looking down on your sister, but, can your sister really drive a race car? Her body is too thin and weak. Dan Tianxing frowned and said. Just as he said this, he was interrupted by Gu Xian. Pfft, I knew you would say that. Huh, just because you said that. The last time I raced with someone, my brakes failed. Do you know who saved me? It was my sister. I can guarantee that there is no racer in this world who can do that. Chapter 994. In the ears of Dan Tianxing and the others, Gu Xian's words were like being hit by a huge wave. That kind of feeling wasn't something that ordinary people could understand. Instinctively, Dan Tianxing and the others thought that Yunjian was simply following her brother Gu Xian to watch the racing. But when Gu Xian exaggerated what happened last time, Dan Tianxing and the others opened their mouths wide, as if they had seen a ghost. The few people present were all racers, so everyone was very clear about the importance of a qualified racer's physical fitness. But what about Yunjian? Yunjian had gained a lot of weight compared to when she had just been reborn. Of course, according to Yunjian's body when she had just been reborn, she could be described as skinny as a match. And now, although Yunjian had gained a lot of weight, her body was still curvaceous. She had the standard figure of someone who looked thin with clothes on but was muscular without clothes. She looked quite thin, so Dan Tianxing and the others didn't suspect her at all. Moreover, racers nowadays were generally men. After all, racing was a profession that put one's life on the line at any time. So, most people in this industry were men. And Yunjian, not only was she thin, but she was also a girl. A girl racing? What kind of joke was that? But when everyone heard Gu Xian's words, they didn't think it was a joke and found it funny. Oh my God. Little Xian, your sister is too amazing. Dan Tianxing's reaction was the most intense. He looked at Yunjian and made exaggerated movements with his hands. After that, Dan Tianxing patted his chest and said, I'll find someone to try this for you. But if it doesn't work, then I really can't do anything, no problem. It's already very good that you're willing to help my sister. You're a good brother. Gu Xian punched Dan Tianxing's chest hard and laughed loudly. Hee, okay, little sister, let's go. I'll drive you to the racing track. Let's go there earlier. Dan Tianxing turned his head and called Yunjian little sister. Then, he laughed out loud. Yunjian didn't mind. Although Dan Tianxing called her little sister, she also felt strange when she heard it. The racetrack was not far from here. Shan Tiancheng drove the car and soon took everyone to the racetrack. During the race, the organizers of the racetrack would prepare their own sports cars. Therefore, Shan Tiancheng's van could carry many people at once. As soon as they entered the racing track, everyone was shocked by the lively atmosphere in front of them. Whether it was the spectator stand or the racing track, they were a dozen times larger than Longmen City's racetrack. The scale was also much larger. Let's sit over there for a while. It hasn't started yet. Dan Tianxing had just entered the arena when he led everyone to the viewing platform. You guys go ahead first. I have something to do, Yunjian said. She pursed her red lips and waved her phone. Ah. Little sister, what else do you want? Dan Tiansheng was surprised. After all, Yun Jian was unfamiliar with this place. What could she possibly have to do? Sister Jian. Just as everyone was surprised that Yun Jian had something to do, a crisp and mature female voice rang out. Yun Jian knew that Temptress must be here once she heard it, so she turned around. Temptress had actually seen her current body before. She had also bumped into Temptress not too long ago, so it was not surprising that Temptress could recognize her now. An enchanting woman was walking toward them. She was Temptress. Temptress came to Yun Jian in a few steps. However, when Dan Tiansheng and the others saw the demonic woman clearly, their faces instantly froze, and even their breathing stopped. Rongyao Company's CEO? You. Are you one of the organizers of this race? Why are you here? Dan Tiansheng's face froze at the sight. When everyone recovered, they were even more terrified. Why was Rongyao Company's CEO, Temptress, here? Chapter 995. Alluring Temptress had a hot body. Her perfect figure was slender and seductive. Coupled with alluring Temptress's face, she exuded an extraordinary aura no matter which angle one looked at her from. Unlike Snake Lizard's seductiveness, Alluring Temptress was just like her name, a living alluring temptress. Her codename was Alluring Temptress, and she usually referred to herself as Alluring Temptress. In other words, she did not have a surname. Everyone in the underworld knew that she was called Alluring Temptress. Rongyao Company's CEO, Alluring Temptress. Dan Tiansheng and his group studied at a local university, so they knew a thing or two about this place. Rongyao Company's CEO, Alluring Temptress, frequented events as well. Even if they had not seen her before, they could often see her in the headlines of Country M's international newspapers. They also heard that Rongyao Company was one of the biggest organizers of tonight's international racing event. Therefore, when Alluring Temptress appeared and Dan Tiansheng and his group recognized her, they watched her walk up to Yun Jian and call her Sister Jian. It was already a miracle that Dan Tiansheng and his group were not scared to death. Since they had come with Yun Jian, Alluring Temptress turned to nod at him when Dan Tiansheng exclaimed in surprise when he looked at her. Alluring Temptress was no doubt the most successful female entrepreneur. Dan Tiansheng and his group had long discussed Alluring Temptress and viewed her as their idol. Therefore, when Alluring Temptress nodded at him, Dan Tiansheng felt like his idol had taken a second look at him. Gu Xian, who was standing at the side, was also stunned by the scene before him. How did his younger sister know? Rongyao Company's CEO, Alluring Temptress? What kind of status did Alluring Temptress have? What about Yun Jian? To Dan Tiansheng and his group, she was only Gu Xian's younger sister. At most, she was a student from an unknown and poor place in Country Z. How did these two people who had nothing to do with each other in the first place know each other? While Dan Tiansheng, Gu Xian, and the rest were stupefied, Alluring Temptress was already in front of Yun Jian. Sister Jian, Temptress called out to Yun Jian again. Yes. Yun Jian nodded slightly. Yun Jian nodded and winked at the demonic woman. Then, she led the way to the viewing platform. Let's sit over there for a while. All right. The demoness was very obedient to Yun Jian. Seeing that the demoness followed Yun Jian over there, Dan Tiansheng originally thought that it was time to enter the racetrack, but in the end, he still followed Yun Jian to sit on the spectator stand. Demoness. The CEO of Rongyao Company was a witch. Their idol. He sat on the spectator stand and watched the competition for a while. Dan Tiansheng's match was about to arrive and he had to leave. The demoness beside her suddenly stood up and turned to look at Yun Jian. Her tall and slender figure gave off an enchanting and charming feeling. Temptress, on the other hand, turned to ask Yun Jian, Sister Jian, how about we have a match? 2 years ago, when Yun Jian was still slaying God, she often raced with Alluring Temptress. Back then, Alluring Temptress was still famous in the racing industry, which was also why Dan Tiansheng idolized her. It was just that after slaying God disappeared, alluring temptress stopped racing. The people in the underworld were all wondering what had caused the demoness to stop the thrilling racing that she loved the most. No one knew the outcome, though. Now, the CEO of Rongyao Company, a racer who once dominated the world, was inviting Yunjian to race. Chapter 996. Fortunately, no one recognized Demoness. Otherwise, based on her popularity, all the racers who loved racing would have screamed and screamed in surprise. The once famous racer, Demoness, had already retired from the scene. When Demoness became a racer, she had just started running Rongyao Company. Every racer wanted to race with Demoness, but there were only a handful of racers who could race with her. Those who had raced with Demoness before would never have the chance to race with her again. Even so, there were still countless people who wanted to race against the famous Demoness. However, there was one exception. Whenever that person appeared, Demoness would definitely race with her until the end. After hundreds and thousands of races, both of them were never tired. Apart from that person, Demoness had never invited anyone else to race with her. That was why Dan Tiansheng and the rest were stunned. However, no one had ever seen the person who was qualified to race with Demoness hundreds and thousands of times. They only knew that the person had long hair and was a woman. However, every time that person appeared in front of everyone, she wore a mask, revealing only a pair of big, black eyes. No one knew who she was. They only knew that she was Demoness' regular racer teammate. Demoness would be wherever she was. The most mysterious thing was that the person's racing skills were even better than Demoness. They were not on the same level. For such a legendary person, the people in the industry only knew about her long hair. Another thing was that Demoness called her SS. After SS became popular on the racing track, countless paparazzi and reporters tried to dig up her background. However, their efforts were to no avail. No one knew who SS was. However, in the racing industry, countless racing fans regarded SS as their idol. Demoness retired from the racing industry after SS' disappearance. At that time, countless racing fans were thoroughly disappointed. However, the people in the industry could not figure it out no matter how hard they racked their brains. That was to piece the two English words together and find a Chinese font that existed on the international leaderboard, slaying God. Demoness had been out of the racing circle for a long time, so when Demoness stood up and turned to look at Yunjian, personally inviting Yunjian to race, Dan Tiansheng's back straightened. Gu Xian's eyes lit up. He was terrified and panicked because other than the legendary SS, no one else had ever been invited by the witch. But what if Dan Tiansheng and Gu Xian believed that Yunjian was an SS? How was this possible? This must be a coincidence. Perhaps it was because Yunjian was really outstanding? Good. We haven't had a match for 2 years. Let's have a good time today. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and smiled. Originally, Yunjian did not plan to race. She came to Country M to see the situation of Rongyao Company. She was, after all, the chairman of Rongyao Company. Now that she had handed the Rongyao Company over to that Demoness, she could not just ignore it. 2 years? Wait, the SS who raced with Demoness had also gone missing 2 years ago. Demoness had not raced since then. There were only a handful of people who had raced with Demoness. If that was the case, then Yunjian who had raced with Demoness, isn't that the legendary SS that even the Demoness couldn't compete with? But how was that possible? Yunjian was an SS? This. Chapter 997. While Dan Tiansheng and the others were thinking about it, Yunjian and Alluring which had already hopped nimbly from the spectator stand to the flat ground. Yunjian's agility and dexterity gave Dan Tiansheng and the others a shock. Dan Tiansheng had even forgotten that he was going to participate in the racing competition. Xiao Xian, who's your younger sister? She even knows Rongyao Company's CEO. Moreover, from the way she jumped down from the stairs just now, it seems that her skills aren't bad. Dan Tiansheng sighed deeply and then said with a pout. What are you thinking? No matter who she is, she's my younger sister. Gu Xian said after rapping his buddy Dan Tianqing's head. Gu Xian paused for a beat before continuing. Xiao Jian is an amazing girl indeed. She's an advanced special forces soldier in my dad's military now. Dan Tianqing was not from Longmen City nor Zhe province, but he was from country Z. He did not know much about the military, nor did he know anything about Team Monarch. However, Dan Tianqing knew one thing: advanced special forces soldiers. Those who could become advanced special forces soldiers were undoubtedly the best of the best. Therefore, when Gu Xian finished speaking, Dan Tianqing had already gone up to Gu Xian and wrapped his arm around Gu Xian's shoulder, exclaiming in shock and confusion. What? Advanced special forces soldier? Your younger sister? F***CK. As Dan Tianqing said this, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he reacted. You're amazing, Xiao Xian. You even found yourself an advanced special forces soldier's younger sister. Your sister is actually a member of the advanced special forces. Just as Dan Tianqing was speaking up to this point, Dan Tianqing's expression changed. Gu Xian reached out his hand and pulled off his buddy Dan Tianqing's hand from his shoulder. Just as he was about to reply to Dan Tianqing, he heard a voice coming from the radio. Brother Dan Tianqing, oh my god, it's Rongyao Company's CEO who retired from racing earlier. Alluring demon, you're back in racing? Am I seeing things? Normally, the host of this international racing competition would be mature and steady. But when he heard the exclamations coming from the broadcast, it wasn't hard to see how shocking the return of Demoness to the racing circle was. The shocked voice that came from the broadcast was a female voice. Because of the return of the demonic woman, the voice sounded very shocked at this moment. However, not long after this woman's voice sounded, a man snatched the woman's loudspeaker. Then, the passionate and bold voice of another host could be heard. After 2 years, our top racer, Siren, the president of Rongyao Company, has returned to the racing circle. Next, we'll be competing with our top racer, Demoness, against a young girl from Z country who calls herself Yunjian. Let's give them a warm welcome. The male and female hosts were both from the United States, and they spoke in English. Of course, whether it was Yunjian, Siren, or Gu Xian and Dan Tianqing, who had lived in Country M for a long time, English was not a problem at all. The hosts were obviously using Demoness to hype things up. The atmosphere in the venue was not very lively at first, but when the host said that, the tens of thousands of people sitting in the spectator stand screamed when they heard that the top racer, Demoness, had returned. Chapter 998. Oh my god. Temptress is back in the racing circle. Am I seeing things? Ah, I'm her #1 fan. In the spectator stands, there were already people who gripped their companions' shoulders in excitement and shook them with guffaws. Temptress is back. The atmosphere reached its climax in an instant. Of course, other than Temptress, there were also people talking about Yunjian. Who's that girl who calls herself Yunjian? What right does she have to compete with Temptress? Other than SS back then, I'm not convinced by anyone. Yeah. Who's that girl called Yunjian? How dare she compete with Lord Temptress of the racing circle? Get out of the racing circle. That's right, Yunjian, get out of the racing circle. After the voices of reverence for the Demoness rang out, another voice soon reached the peak. It meant that Yunjian should get out of the racing circle. Ever since the match between SS and Temptress, any racer who competed with Temptress would be scolded by the fans of the two teams, telling them to get out of the racing circle, saying that they were unworthy of being a racer. Wait a minute, for example, this kind of sound was like the wind and clouds were surging. At the moment, Yunjian, who was spurned and asked to leave the racing circle by the audience, was wearing a helmet to prevent accidents. The helmet could save a racer's life in some accidents, so the regular racing channels would usually let the racers wear it. Sister Jian, go easy on me later. I haven't played this game for 2 years, but don't let me lose too badly. At least give me some face. Ha! Temptress winked coquettishly at Yunjian and teased with a chuckle. Tonight's racing competition was international, so the organizers would provide their own sports cars. Of course, the quality of the sports cars provided by the organizers would not be bad. To be fair, the two sports cars provided by the organizers were of the same brand and model. In other words, the racers could only win with their own skills. Let's rely on our own abilities, Yun Jian said with a slight smile. Haha. We can go to the starting track and get ready. Siren wasn't angry. She laughed heartily and drove the Bentley sports car provided by the organizers with Yun Jian. They slowly drove from the inspection station to the track. It wasn't until Yun Jian and the demonic woman drove out of the inspection station that some of the staff members standing in the same place began to discuss with disdain. TSK, who does that girl think she is? Let's just rely on our own abilities. Did she really think that she could win against the Demoness? Does she think she's an SS? Demoness is just giving her some face. She really thinks she's a divine racer. Can she beat Demoness? This is simply daydreaming. Just as the crew members were discussing Yun Jian and alluring which, they saw two Bentley sports cars stomping on the accelerator and speeding away from the starting point on the other side of the track with the referee's gunshot. If one wanted to distinguish which Bentley was in which Yun Jian was sitting, one only needed to look at the color of the car. Yun Jian's car was black while Seductress's was silver gray. Just as they sped out of the starting point, Seductress silver gray sports car was one step ahead of Yun Jian. Seeing this, the staff members who were talking about Yun Jian's arrogance grew even more excited. However, the discussion stopped abruptly midway. In the next second, the staff members were so shocked that their jaws dropped. Chapter 999. Before Yun Jian and Seductress stepped on the accelerator and the car sped away, the people in the spectator stands were almost going crazy. Such voices could be said to have penetrated the whole venue. Seductress will win. Yun Jian, get out of the racing circle. Faced with such aggressive voices, Gu Xian, who was still standing in place, and Shan Tiansheng, who was still standing in place and had not yet prepared for the race, looked at the scene in front of them with a terrible expression. After all, Yun Jian was with them. Especially Gu Xian. Gu Xian had already regarded Yun Jian as his own sister. When he suddenly heard Yun Jian being cursed by everyone present, Gu Xian's expression was the worst. His own sister was being cursed and asked to get out of the racing circle. As her brother, he certainly felt bad. In addition to this, Gu Xian was also very worried about Yun Jian. After all, Seductress was once the king of the racing circle. It could be said that except for the legendary SS, Seductress had never lost to anyone. Therefore, under such circumstances, it was normal for Gu Xian to be worried. Yun Jian's racing skills were amazing, and Gu Xian had already experienced it. But compared to Seductress, at this moment, the two Bentleys driven by Yun Jian and Seductress had already sped out of the finish line. Almost at the same time, Seductress silver gray Bentley took the lead and rushed out of the starting point. As a result, the screams in the venue became even more obvious. Ah! Seductress will win. Yun Jian, get out of the racing circle. Gu Xian's hands were tightly clenched together. Listening to the people around him belittling Yun Jian with such words, as her brother, he was really, for the first time, Gu Xian felt powerless. When Gu Xian lowered his head and raised it slightly, a frightening scene suddenly appeared in the eyes of everyone present. The two sports cars had arrived at the turning point one after the other. However, just as the two sports cars reached the turning point, the black Bentley that was lagging behind suddenly made a sharp turn. In the next second, it stepped on the accelerator just as the silver-gray sports car driven by the Demoness in front of it began to brake. It was usually unrealistic to overtake on a curve because it was very dangerous. Even when driving, it was very dangerous to overtake on a curve. Moreover, when racing, almost all of them were sprinting at full speed. When they encountered a curve, not only did they not step on the brakes, they even had to step on the accelerator to speed forward. Such a person was simply one of a kind. However, Yun Jian was one of them. It was also this crazy action that made countless audience members hold onto the railing tightly and raise their butts slightly. They widened their eyes and looked at this scene in shock and horror. Did she not want to live anymore? Chi. When they reached the curve, the black Bentley driven by Yun Jian stepped on the accelerator like a flash of lightning. In the shortest time, the car used the highest speed to fiercely overtake the silver-gray Bentley that had slowed down. After overtaking the silver-gray Bentley, the black Bentley driven by Yun Jian turned a corner and finally disappeared from everyone's sight. However, it appeared on the large screen in the spectator stands. Silence. There was a deathly silence. Soon after, there were screams from the audience that were boiling with excitement. Oh my God! She actually overtook Demonis? How is this possible? Other than SS, Demonis has never been overtaken, but today she actually. The voices that were cursing Yun Jian to get out of the racing circle suddenly disappeared. What followed was a shocking scream. At this moment, whether it was the group of staff members who had mocked Yun Jian, Dan Tiansheng, Gu Xian, all the audience in the spectator stands, or the racers in the lounge, all of them widened their eyes. This scene was almost unbelievable. Chapter 1000. In spite of it, Yun Jian was already driving the black Bentley sports car ahead of Alluring Witch by leaps and bounds while the crowd was howling with excitement. But Little Demon was not to be outdone. After Yun Jian took a huge lead, she stepped on the accelerator to catch up. At this moment, Little Demon had a very wild feeling. She felt that she had found her initial joy and passion for racing. Sure enough, racing with an SS car was the most exciting. There was no other. Little Demon was full of passion at this moment. The audience in the spectator stands were so enthusiastic that they could not control themselves. Although Alluring Demonis and Yun Jian's race was interrupted midway, none of the racers objected when they saw Alluring Demonis making a comeback. But the scene that no one expected was that Yun Jian actually took a huge lead in the beginning of the race. Furthermore, this was under the circumstance that the Demonis had rushed out of the starting point first. Gu Xian saw that Yun Jian had overtaken Little Demon. It was as if he had seen hope. At this moment, Gu Xian's heart was filled with excitement. Yun Jian will win. Yun Jian will win. Gu Xian looked at the battle in front of him and shouted unconsciously. After shouting twice, Gu Xian realized that no one around him was paying attention to him. Even when they heard his voice, the people around him glanced at him coldly. But Gu Xian did not stop shouting. He elbowed Dan Tiansheng in the stomach and then forced Dan Tiansheng to shout with him. The strength of a few people could sometimes drive the whole audience. Gu Xian's shouting also stirred up the atmosphere. Gradually, when they saw that Yun Jian had overtaken Little Demon, some people also shouted with Gu Xian. For a moment, the audience in the spectator stands were divided into two factions. The audience was shouting and screaming at the same time. The atmosphere had reached its climax. However, at this moment, someone pointed at the screen and shouted loudly, "Look! There!" This person's voice was quickly drowned out by the shouts of the audience in the spectator stands. However, everyone present saw a scene that scared them out of their wits. At this time, the sports car driven by Yun Jian and the witch was about to reach the finish line. Although Siren was not as fast as Yun Jian, she followed closely behind Yun Jian's black Bentley. Seeing that the seductive woman's sports car was about to overtake Yun Jian's sports car in terms of speed. Just as the audience's hearts were tightly clenched and their blood was boiling. However, the black Bentley suddenly stepped on the brakes. The sports car was originally moving at a terrifying speed of over 200 kilometers per hour. If he suddenly slammed on the brakes, the car and the people inside would be forcefully braked by the inertia and be sent flying. "Is she crazy?" a member of the audience yelled in horror. At this moment, a shocking turn of events suddenly occurred. The moment the car braked, the black Bentley began to slide to the left. At the same time, due to inertia, it spun and slid crazily. It spun twice as fast as the original speed of the sports car, and was flung away. With this toss, the hearts of everyone present almost fell out. Was he going to screw up? Everyone present could not help but think so. However, just as they thought so, they saw the black Bentley driven by Yun Jian bounce to the finish line at the speed of a spring after being flung away. When it reached the finish line, the black Bentley spun a few times on the spot and suddenly came to a stop. Yun Jian won. Siren reached the finish line 10 seconds later than Yun Jian. However, at this moment, no cheers could be heard. The people present could no longer express their inner feelings with the word shock. Why did the way the black Bentley used just now feel so familiar? SS. I've seen that move in SS car before. She's SS, she's SS. Someone suddenly reacted and pointed out the mystery. Hearing this person's words, everyone present stood up in fright. Yun Jian was actually SS. Chapter 1001. Those who had looked down on Yun Jian, including those who had insulted Yun Jian and demanded that Yun Jian get out of the racing circle when they heard about the race between Yun Jian and Siren. Those who had checked the station and said that Yun Jian was daydreaming if she thought she could beat Siren. Gu Xian, Dan Tiansheng, and the others. Everyone's eyes widened in horror as they stared at the scene in front of them in astonishment. The whole place was silent. Everyone had the same expression on their faces, stunned, stunned. At this moment, no one's expression was normal. Especially those who had looked down on Yun Jian. They were all dumbfounded. Were they seeing things? The girl who looked like she was under 18 years old was actually SS? But at this moment, they had no choice but to believe it. Today was an international racing competition, and the people who came were all racing fans who had watched countless races. Many of the spectators were fans who had watched the SS race back in the day, and they were familiar with the SS driving skills. Wasn't Yun Jian's move the same as SS's usual move during the final sprint? As racing fans, they couldn't be wrong. After a moment of silence, the crowd began to roar and seethe. SS's appearance was even more shocking than the return of the top racer, Siren. And the most shocking thing of the day was that SS, who had been famous in the racing circle but had never shown her face, was actually a young girl. But if SS was so young now, then 2 years ago, how old was she? 13? 14? Oh my God. Everyone present was so shocked by this that they almost stopped breathing. At this moment, the driver's seat of the black Bentley parked at the finish line opened. Yun Jian's flawless face appeared in front of the crowd's eyes. SS. 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 On the grandstand, someone led the crowd to shout at the top of their lungs. The atmosphere was 100 times hotter than before. Yun Jian frowned slightly when she heard the orderly cheers. Her delicate face made people feel even more excited. Not long after, the Demoness silver-gray Bentley also braked at the finish line. She got out of the silver-gray Bentley in a rather handsome manner. Then, she swung the car door and closed it. The demonic woman laughed bluntly before she walked up to Yun Jian. She reached out her hand and stroked her hairline. Then, she said to Yun Jian as she walked. Sister Jian, your driving skills are still amazing even after 2 years of absence. Haha. You've improved. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and commented. Yun Jian never flattered people, but whatever came out of her mouth was definitely the truest words. The Demoness driving skills had indeed improved. If it was 2 years ago, she would have been left far behind. Ha. Of course. Demoness was not bashful from Yun Jian's compliment. Instead, she admitted it openly. As they spoke, Yun Jian and Alluring Witch walked out of the racetrack side by side. Just as they exited the track, a large group of reporters who had already brought their cameras swarmed toward them, all of them dashing toward Yun Jian. Hello. May I ask if you're SS who suddenly disappeared 2 years ago? Do you know that Demoness disappeared from the racing scene after you disappeared? Can you explain why you left the racing scene back then? May I ask if you'll make a comeback? Why didn't you show your real face before? Chapter 1002. The reporters were like a swarm of bees. If they were not held back by the organizer's security guards, they would have probably pounced on Yunjian and interrogated her with all sorts of questions. It was fortunate that an international racing competition like this had people from the organizer's side keeping these terrifying reporters in check. After all, these reporters were quite fearsome in order to get first-hand headlines. In the past, any racer who was slightly famous in the international racing competition would be swarmed by these fearsome reporters. Therefore, to control the reporters as much as possible, the organizer had sent security guards to stop them. In spite of it, there were just too many reporters. Even with the security guards deployed, they could not stop all of them. The venue was in a state of chaos, but to Yunjian, it was as if nothing had happened. She merely squinted her eyes. Hello. Hello. Can you please answer my question? Will you reappear in the racing circle as SS? Excuse me. If the people who were yelling for Yunjian to get out of the racing circle at the spectator stands were intense in their tone, these reporters were 100 times more frenzied than them. Sister Jian, let's leave from the back door of the racetrack. A luring demon went up to Yunjian and told Yunjian softly with a nod. Yunjian nodded and answered a luring demon. SS, are you leaving? You'll return to the racing circle, right? You. The reporters panicked when they saw Yunjian turn around without saying a word. Yunjian ignored them and turned slightly to the side. After a pause, she turned around again to show the reporters her back. The corners of her beautiful lips curled up slightly, and a bright light flashed through her eyes. In the next second, her melodious voice rang out. I'll only answer one question. Yunjian paused for a beat before her voice trailed off. What does it have to do with you whether I race or not? Are you my parents or my parents? Why are you so nosy? Yunjian's words were not polite at all. The reporters at the scene originally thought that Yunjian could really answer a decent question. But Yunjian's words meant, wasn't she indirectly saying that the reporters were meddling in other people's business? Although Yunjian's words didn't sound elegant at all, the racers in the distance almost couldn't help clapping and cheering when they heard her. This group of racers was usually afraid of being chased by reporters, but standing in a group of reporters, although they were very disgusted by the reporters' questions, they couldn't fly into a rage. However, Yunjian's actions had completely vented everyone's anger. Seeing Yunjian turn around and walk away after saying this, the group of reporters froze in place and surprisingly did not chase after her. The reporters who were standing still saw the look in Yunjian's eyes and were a little shocked at the moment. That young girl's eyes could be so cold. It was as if they dared to chase after her, they would immediately die on the spot. After receiving Yunjian's cold glare, the reporters all stood still in a daze and didn't chase after her. The people in the spectator stands were stunned. Everyone was dumbfounded. One had to know that when a racer finished a race, this group of reporters would chase after the racer like crazy in order to get first-hand news. Chapter 1003. While the reporters were dumbfounded and too scared to follow them, Yunjian was already led away by Temptress through the back door of the racetrack. Those damn reporters kept pestering you, Sister Jian. They're usually pestering me, but Sister Jian, your gaze just now must have scared them to death. Just as Temptress led Yunjian out of the racetrack's back door and came to a flat area illuminated only by a single light, she guffawed loudly. This did not match Temptress's seductive image at all. Temptress was seductive, but her seductive image was only shown to outsiders. She was never strict with Yunjian. Yunjian gave a curt nod, but it was obvious from the slight curvature that she was replying to Temptress. Yunjian had always been one to speak her mind. Honestly, it was a headache for her to face the reporters. It was fine if she did not say anything, but once she did, the reporters would back off. Sis. Just as Yunjian and Temptress arrived at the racetrack's entrance, a male voice rang out. They were at the racetrack's entrance and the loud cheers from the spectator stands could be heard from here. It could be seen that another exciting racing performance was about to begin. It was not as intense as Yunjian and Temptress race, but the atmosphere on the spectator stands was already boiling. In comparison, the racetrack's entrance seemed a little lonely. There was only one spot of light that shone down, making it feel a little desolate. In spite of it, Yun Jian did not find it desolate. She tilted her head slightly toward the source of the voice and saw Gu Xian waving toward them. There were a few buddies from Gu Xian with him as well. Dan Tianxing was the leader. It was almost Dan Tianxing's race, but he seemed to be more excited to see Yun Jian than the race. When Yun Jian heard Gu Xian's voice, she stopped in her tracks. When Temptress saw Yun Jian stop, she stopped as well. Phew! Yun Jian! You! Dan Tianxing was still panting when he ran over. He took a deep breath to adjust his emotions. Yun Jian, are you really SS? Dan Tianxing finally asked the question that Gu Xian and the rest wanted to ask. Just as he asked the question, however, Dan Tianxing paused and said, "No, I don't mean anything else. It's because I admire Temptress and SS very much, so." "I am," Yun Jian answered naturally. Yun Jian did not answer whether she was SS or not when she was interviewed. Dan Tianxing and the others chased after her was to ask for an answer. Yes or no. Although Dan Tianxing and the rest were prepared, they were still stunned at this moment. Gu Xian put his arm around Dan Tianxing's shoulder naturally and said in a boastful manner, "Of course, I finally know why Master Corentin calls Sister S. And why Master Corentin wants Sister to be his disciple." "What? Master Corentin? Little Xian, are you talking about the world's most famous top-notch mechanic, Master Corentin? Master Corentin wants to be Yun Jian's disciple?" This. Chapter 1004. Corentin was also well known in the racing circle. What was that supposed to mean? Corentin did not race, but why was he so famous in the racing circle? It was because Corentin's modified racing car was the best in the world. Any racer would have a grand goal or wish, which was to get a sports car modified by Master Corentin. Therefore, Corentin was famous in the racing circle. Moreover, Corentin had a quirk that everyone in the industry knew. It was impossible to get a sports car modified by Master Corentin even if you had the money. It also depended on his mood. If he was in a bad mood or did not like you, he would not modify you even if it cost him his life. This was mentioned before. Of course, the reason Corentin could be so arrogant was because he had his own skills. He had the capital to be so arrogant and brash. Therefore, when they heard that someone like him was begging to be Yun Jian's disciple, Shan Tianxing and the rest were shocked and fearful. Huh? That old man Corentin is still begging to be Sister Jian's disciple? To Shan Tianxing and the rest, Corentin's begging to be Yun Jian's disciple was terrifying, but alluring demon was only impressed by his perseverance. As for Corentin wanting to be Yun Jian's disciple, it was just a normal thing. Sister Jian, that old man still hasn't given up. Are you going to take him in? Alluring demon crossed her arms lazily and looked at Yun Jian with a grin, her eyes twinkling with a peculiar glint. No, Yun Jian retorted. Shan Tianxing and the rest shuddered again when they heard Yun Jian's straightforward rejection. That was the internationally renowned mechanic, Master Corentin. If it were any of Dan Tianxing's men, they would be very satisfied if Master Corentin were to meet them, let alone acknowledge them as his master. What about Yun Jian? Why? Yun Jian, why didn't you take Master Corentin in? If Yun Jian took Master Corentin as her disciple, would it not be a piece of cake for him to modify a sports car? Dan Tianxing asked in confusion. Because. Yun Jian tilted her head and looked at Dan Tianxing. She narrowed her eyes slightly, and there was a beautiful luster in her eyes that no one could underestimate. Because he's not qualified. In the next second, Yun Jian's soft voice rang out. When this voice rang out, Dan Tianxing and the others were completely stunned. What did he mean by Master Corentin wasn't qualified? If even Master Corentin wasn't qualified, then who else in the world was? However, after Yun Jian finished speaking, she smiled faintly, turned sideways, and took a step forward. Little Xian, your sister is an SS, the king of the racing circle. That's true, but Master Corentin's strength isn't just for show. For her to speak of Master Corentin like that, isn't it a little? Dan Tianxing said hesitantly. Little brother, you're really flattering that old man Corentin. He's nothing to Sister Jian. Temptress winked at Dan Tianxing and the others before she followed Yun Jian with a chuckle. What Temptress said surprised Dan Tianxing and the others. That was not the end of it. When Gus Xian heard that, he could not help stepping up to tell his buddy, Dan Tianxing. Tianxing, I used to think that Master Corentin was the best mechanic in the world, but ever since I drove the Ferrari sports car my sister modified, the Ferrari sports car my sister modified is twice as fast as Master Corentin's modified sports car. Master Corentin's modified sports car was originally twice as fast as a regular sports car. That was already the limit. However, a mechanic who could double the speed of Master Corentin's modified sports car, there was probably no one else in the world who could do that. Chapter 1005. While Dan Tianxing and the others were still in shock, Gus Xian had already caught up with Yun Jian and told her that he had to return to the venue to watch Dan Tianxing's race. He asked Yun Jian if she wanted to go back with him. Yun Jian had just caused such a big commotion. Of course, it was not suitable for her to go back now. Thus, Yun Jian curved her red lips and smiled faintly. I won't go. Give me a call after you finish watching the race tonight. With that, Yun Jian patted her trouser pocket gently and smiled. She placed her phone in her trouser pocket. Okay. Gus Xian nodded. Dan Tianxing's race was not over yet. As a brother, he had to be there. Otherwise, he would be too unbrotherly. After Yun Jian finished talking to Gus Xian, she left with Demonis. Yun Jian came to Maryland in Country M to check on the Rongyao Company's recent situation. Coincidentally, Gus Xian could not leave tonight, so Yun Jian went to Rongyao Company with Demonis. Rongyao Company was located in the largest downtown area in Maryland. It occupied a vast area and was the tallest high-rise building in Maryland. It was already nighttime and almost dawn. However, the downtown area in Maryland was the busiest area in the vicinity. Even now, it was still crowded. There were still people working overtime in Rongyao Company. When Demonis followed Yun Jian into the Rongyao Company, the employees who were working overtime looked at Yun Jian with surprise and suspicion. The Demonis was the CEO of the Rong and Yao Company. This was something that everyone in the company knew. But what was going on now? How could the CEO of their company single-handedly support Rongyao Company from an unknown company to the current CEO of one of the top 10 international corporations in the world? And she was actually following behind a young girl who looked less than 18 years old? What was going on? However, before the people present could think too much, the siren followed Yun Jian and walked past the group of workers who were still working overtime. Good evening, CEO. When the Demonis passed by them, the group of employees greeted her politely. However, when they saw Yun Jian, they all opened their mouths but didn't know how to address her. It wasn't until Yun Jian and the Demonis were far away that the group of staff members began to chatter endlessly. Who is that girl? Why does it seem like our company's CEO is following behind her? It's probably a coincidence. Who do you think our CEO is? The CEO probably just happened to be following that young girl. The few female staff members who were standing at the same spot were very jealous of Yun Jian for being able to make the Demonis follow behind her. It was as if she was ordering her own subordinates. People's jealousy was very scary, so these female staff members began to gossip again. Just as they reached this part of their conversation, they were either hinting or comforting themselves that it was just a coincidence that Demonis was following Yun Jian. However, they heard Demonis speaking to Yun Jian from afar. Sister Jian, the company's going downhill right now because of Hoggy Company suppression. The rest of the words did not register in the female staff members who stood at the same spot. However, the few female staff members present heard the two words. Sister Jian? The CEO of Rongyao Company was calling the girl sister. What did this mean? Did it mean that the girl's status was higher than Demonis? Chapter 1006. Suddenly thinking of this, several female staff members suddenly covered their mouths and looked at Yunjian's fading figure in disbelief. Oh my god, could she be the legendary founder of the Rongyao Company, the chairman of the Rongyao Company? Since the establishment of the Rongyao Company, the chairman of the Rongyao Company had never shown his face. So when they heard Demonis call Yunjian sister, the group of female staff members guessed it. The expression of the people present could not be described with the word frightened. They seemed to have seen the founder of the Rongyao Company, the legendary chairman. For a moment, the group of female staff members even forgot that they were secretly criticizing Yunjian and despising Yunjian in their hearts. At this moment, Yunjian and Demonis had already taken the elevator to the office on the 25th floor. The 25th floor was where the offices of all the executives of the Rongyao Company were located. Demonis' office was also on the 25th floor. As soon as they came out of the elevator, Demonis took Yunjian directly to her office. After hearing Demonis say that the company's development was going downhill recently, Yunjian was neither happy nor worried. She asked faintly, Hoggy Company? Yes, Hoggy Company is also one of the top 10 international companies, but Hoggy Company's international status is slightly higher than our Rongyao Company. The reason is because Hoggy Company is a company passed down from ancient times. After thousands of years of business development, its foundation is deeply rooted. Recently, the chairman of Hoggy Company has been suppressing us, so the company's sales have been greatly reduced recently. Demonis was not vague at all when talking about serious matters. She explained to Yunjian word by word. However, just as she said this, Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Because at this moment, Yunjian and Demonis had already arrived at the door of Demonis' office. Yunjian, on the other hand, saw two figures in a luring demon's office. When Demonis saw the two figures, one standing and one sitting in her office, she frowned deeply. Yunjian raised her eyebrows slightly. Under normal circumstances, Rongyao Company had guards at the door, so outsiders could not enter. However, it was almost midnight now, and basically everyone in the company had gotten off work, except for some people who were still working overtime. Therefore, there were no guards outside the door, and there were still people in the company. The door was open, so it was not strange that someone could enter. However, the strange thing was that this person actually found Demonis' office. Mayor? Demonis frowned and said in astonishment. Once Yunjian heard a luring witch's shout, she knew who the two people in the office, one standing and one sitting, were. The man standing was Mayor, the chairman of Hoggy Company. The woman sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed was Mel's sister, Maggie. Hoggy Company was the company that had been suppressing Rongyao Company recently. At least now that Rongyao Company was in Demonis' hands, she could not compete with Hoggy Company. Huh, my little Demonis, I finally caught you. Mayor glanced at Yunjian, then turned to look at Demonis and said generously. What are you doing here? Aren't you afraid that I will kill you? Demonis glared at Mayor fiercely. In fact, based on the current situation, Demonis, as the chairman of Rongyao Company, was being suppressed by Hoggy Company. Mayor was Demonis' strongest opponent. Pfft. However, Mayor was amused and laughed. His handsome face added a trace of the CEO's dignified demeanor. Of course we are here to laugh at you. Mai raised her head arrogantly and looked at Demonis. Mai glanced at Demonis, then glanced at Yunjian. Seeing that Yunjian was wearing clothes from a street stall, she laughed for a while, then mocked her. Chapter 1007. Yunjian did not plan to speak, but she merely raised a brow when the topic shifted to her. Hoggy Company was one of the top 10 international corporations and its international status was incomparable to ordinary companies. In fact, Hoggy Company and Rongyao Company existed side by side. The only difference was that Rongyao Company had only risen in recent years. Hoggy Company, on the other hand, was an industry that had been passed down for generations. In comparison, Hoggy Company's international status was perhaps a few levels higher than Rongyao Company's. Hoggy Company was considered a strong competitor to Rongyao Company. As for Mayor and Mai, they were siblings and Mare was the CEO of Hoggy Company, holding 20% of the company's shares. He could be considered one of the biggest shareholders of the company. Yun Jian had planned to see why Mare and Mai and I were here, but she did not expect Mai and I to target her. She narrowed her eyes and stared straight ahead. Mai and I had thought of teasing Yun Jian when she saw her standing quietly on the side, especially since Hoggy Company and Rongyao Company's CEO, Temptress, were archenemies. Looking at Yun Jian's attire, Mai and I had thought of mocking her, which was why she had mocked Yun Jian so viciously. Just as she finished mocking Yun Jian, Mai Ni's gaze was fixed on Temptress. To Mai and I, Yun Jian was probably just an insignificant employee in the company, perhaps a poor beggar who came out of nowhere. Mai Ni's purpose of belittling Yun Jian was to suppress Temptress in terms of aura. It was not that she had seen Yun Jian. In Mai Ni's eyes, Yun Jian was just a stepping stone for her to suppress Temptress. Before Yun Jian could get angry, Temptress was already fuming when she heard what Mai and I said. How dare she call Sister Jian a poor beggar? If Sister Jian was poor, would there be any rich people in the world? You're not welcome here. Get lost. Scram as far as you can. Although the demoness usually looked seductive, she was very strong when she was fierce. At this moment, the demoness was walking toward Mare and Mai and I in a pair of pointy stilettos. She picked up a mop and was about to chase them away. She looked like a shrew. "Oh, my little demoness, don't be like this. Nier is still young and doesn't know any better. If she said something she shouldn't have, don't lower yourself to her level." Mare turned to the side and grabbed the mop that Siren swung at him. "Brother. How dare she enter Rongyao Company with that outfit? Humph, even if Rongyao Company is not as good as our Haji, Rongyao Company is still one of the top 10 multinational companies in the world. Even such a person can come in. The threshold of your Rongyao Company is too low." Pfft. Mai and I placed her hand softly on her cheek. Even her brother, Mare, was ashamed to hear her scornful look. Temptress was even more furious when she heard that. She yanked the mop back from Mare's hand and was about to fling it at Mai and I. It was then that Yun Jian's voice rang. "What does it have to do with you whether the threshold of our Rongyao Company is high or not? I think a beggar on the street is better than a certain woman who sprays Dior cologne all over." A woman who sprays Dior cologne all over? Mai and I froze. Was she not referring to herself? Chapter 1008. Mare and Mai and I didn't even notice the words Rongyao Company. Yun Jian wasn't complaining about the Dior perfume. She was cursing Mai and I in a roundabout way, saying that she was worse than a beggar on the street. In fact, most women knew how to spray perfume. For example, Seductive Woman also sprayed perfume. There were many types of perfume. Some people liked simple and elegant scents. Seductive Woman, for example, sprayed a simple and elegant perfume even though she was seductive. As for Mai and I, she sprayed a very strong perfume. Of course, everyone had their own preferences. Yun Jian wasn't complaining about Mai Ni's Dior perfume. It was just that Mai and I had coincidentally sprayed Dior perfume. At the same time, everyone present could tell that Yun Jian was implying that Mai and I was worse than a beggar on the street. This was purely a scolding without any vulgarities. Moreover, Yun Jian emphasized the woman who sprayed Dior perfume. There were only 4 people present. Yun Jian and Mare didn't spray perfume. Seductive Woman sprayed a faint perfume. Yun Jian could tell that it wasn't a Dior perfume with one sniff. Then there was only one person present who fit the description. That person was Mai and I. Therefore, Mai Ni's face instantly darkened after Yun Jian said that. Mai and I had been spoiled since she was young. She had always treated Yun Jian as a beggar. Now that she heard Yun Jian say that she was worse than a beggar, she exploded on the spot. "What did you say? You actually said that I'm worse than a beggar. Ah. I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." Mai and I flew into a rage on the spot. She picked up a teacup from the coffee table and threw it at Yun Jian. Mai and I was a typical rich young lady. She was the young lady of one of the top 10 international corporations, Hoggy Company. Therefore, she had a very delicate personality. Usually, no one would even say anything bad about her. There were only a bunch of people who flattered her. Therefore, when Mai Ni heard Yun Jian belittle her to be worse than a beggar, she felt as if she had been greatly insulted. Especially when Mai Ni thought that Yun Jian was a lowly person, the feeling of being despised by a lowly person made Mai Ni explode instantly. Go to hell. Mai Ni grabbed a teacup and threw it at Yun Jian. Not even Mare was able to react to this sudden turn of events. However, when Mare turned to the side to stop his sister, Mai Ni's teacup had already been thrown viciously at Yun Jian. Inside the teacup, there was also a bowl of cool tea water. Mare's expression suddenly changed, but it was too late for him to stop her. The teacup that was filled with cooling tea leaves had already spun in the air and was about to splash on Yun Jian when the cold tea leaves splashed onto her. Alluring Demon's gaze dimmed, but she did not do anything else because she knew Sister Jian's ability. In spite of it, Mare's heart clenched when he saw the scene. He could feel that Alluring Demon cared a lot about Yun Jian, and he did not come here to go against Alluring Demon. Instead, if the tea had splashed on Yun Jian and the teacup had smashed on her as well, she would not have been able to escape. Would it not be the end of him and Alluring Demon then? Just as he thought about it, Mare saw a horrifying scene. Mai Ni, who stood beside Mare, saw it as well. With a bang, Yun Jian suddenly took a step forward and spun the teacup in the air for a few seconds. Before the water in the teacup could pour completely, she suddenly raised her leg and kicked the teacup back at Mai Ni. Before the water in the teacup could pour, Yun Jian's kick was forceful, but it was just right. Both Mare and Mai Ni were dumbfounded. However, just as the two of them were stunned, Mai Ni suddenly felt a wave of ice-cold tea soak her body, and a large teacup was smashed towards her forehead. Chapter 1009. Initially, the teacup was headed straight for Yun Jian, but Yun Jian's high kick just now had landed on the teacup. She kicked it back at Mai Ni without spilling the tea. Not only was Mai Ni soaked and sticky from the cold tea in the teacup when she was hit by the teacup, but more importantly, her forehead swelled up from the impact. For a rich young lady like Mai Ni, she had never experienced such excruciating pain since she was young. Tears were about to flow from the impact, and at the same time, a deep hatred for Yun Jian welled up within her. The urge to kill Yun Jian on the spot took root in Mai Ni. Go to hell. Mai Ni held her forehead that was hit by the teacup and screamed at Yun Jian. Halfway through her sentence, Mai Ni endured the pain and told Mare in a tone that sounded like she wanted to tear Yun Jian into pieces. Gidge, how dare this damn woman hit me? Kill her. I want her dead. In spite of it, Yun Jian, who had retracted her leg, crossed her arms and looked at Mai Ni in disdain before snickering softly. Since when can a rabid dog like this enter my Rongyao company? Chase her out. Her words were directed at Alluring Witch, but her gaze was blatantly on Mai Ni. At this moment, Mai Ni was like an unreasonable little beggar. She looked pathetic and comical. Sister Jian, I'll chase these two rabid dogs out right away. Alluring Witch grinned and walked to Mare with ease. Seeing Mare supporting Mai Ni in such a sorry state, the demonic woman sneered and provoked Mare, don't worry. What are you waiting for? Take your sister and get out of my territory. Mare's heart skipped a beat when he saw Witch's impatient face, but he tried to explain his sister's behavior just now. Witch, don't be mad. My sister was just, Gidge. Who are you helping? It hurts so much. I'm going to die from the pain. Mai Ni screamed and wailed. Yun Jian frowned when she saw Mai Ni still screaming. She could not stand it anymore, so she went up and dragged Mai Ni out of the office by her collar. I'll help you if you don't leave. Yun Jian did not care that Mai Ni was still struggling as she dragged her all the way from the 25th floor to the first floor. Yun Jian's action frightened Mare and Mai Ni, but Mare was held back by Witch, so he could only watch his sister being dragged to the first floor by Yun Jian. Mare was afraid of hurting Witch, who was blocking his way, so he dared not do anything. There were plenty of employees working overtime on the first floor, especially the female employees who had gossiped about Yun Jian just now. When they saw Yun Jian dragging something out of the elevator while holding someone's collar, they were spooked. Although the female employees suspected that Yun Jian was the director of Rongyao Company, they did not have sufficient evidence. Moreover, how old was Yun Jian? Therefore, this suspicion was quickly ruled out by the crowd. When they saw Yun Jian dragging my NI out of the elevator and tossing her out of the door, the employees were dumbfounded. How could this young lady be so fierce? And who was the person she was dragging? It was my NI. The daughter of Hoggy Company's director. How dare she? Yun Jian turned slightly to look at the girl who looked to be around 16 or 17 years old who had suddenly appeared. The girl was Siren's subordinate and also a member of the Kosha mercenaries. Her code name was Fox. Fox was Tanuki who delivered the Ferrari sports car to Longmen City for Yun Jian back then. Fox looked like a young girl, but she looked exactly the same as Tanuki. They both had the same baby face. She was actually 25 years old. As for the Fox, he was working under the demonic woman. Fox had just caught sight of Siren when she shouted, drawing Mare and Miney's attention to her. Then, she saw Yun Jian. She was stunned but called out to Yun Jian right in front of Mare and my NI, "Chairman, you're back?" The word chairman took Mare and my NI by surprise. Fox was Siren's subordinate and also someone who had come into contact with the mysterious chairman of Rongyao Company. Chapter 10-11. You're the director of the legendary Rongyao Company? My NI widened her eyes at Yun Jian in disbelief when she heard Fox's words, her pupils constricting. My NI looked like a downtrodden beggar as she stared at Yun Jian in disbelief and asked. My NI did not even care about the excruciating pain from being hit by the teacup as she asked Yun Jian with a terrified gaze. Fox, who was standing on the stairs not far away, glanced down at my NI in disdain before snorting and speaking to my NI on behalf of Yun Jian. Sister Jian is the director of Rongyao Company, of course. Fox was different from Alluring Demon. Fox was an assassin from Kosha mercenaries and had only started working under Alluring Demon later on. Alluring Demon was the daughter of a bankrupt wealthy businessman whom Yun Jian had rescued back then. Alluring Demon was not an assassin or a secret agent, but she had mastered some basic self-defense skills. Yun Jian had saved Alluring Demon because she had taken a liking to Alluring Demon's business talent. Alluring Demon knew that Yun Jian was slaying God. It was Yun Jian who had rescued Alluring Demon when her family was in dire straits, so Alluring Demon was loyal to Yun Jian. Moreover, Alluring Demon was in charge of Rongyao Company now, so her status in the international arena was extraordinary. Alluring Demon's skills could take down a bunch of ordinary people, but she was nothing compared to high-level assassins and secret agents. After all, Alluring Demon was only good at business. She was once the daughter of a wealthy businessman and had been pampered since she was young. As for self-defense skills, she had learned them later on. This was also the reason why Yun Jian had sent Fox to assist Alluring Demon. Fox was from Kosha mercenaries, so his ability could take on at least 3 high-level secret agents. This allowed Fox to be ranked within the top 20 in the secret agent ranking. Since Fox came from Kosha mercenaries, he knew Yun Jian's Kosha mercenaries and Yun Jian's international status better than the witch. Therefore, Fox was not polite to my NI. Although my NI was the daughter of Hoggy Company's chairman, if Hoggy Company really wanted to fight with the Kosha mercenaries, the Kosha mercenaries could make Hoggy Company disappear from this world forever. Fox's words shocked Mag and Mel even more. After that, my NI remembered the tone in which the Fox had spoken to her. "Who the hell are you? You're just a dog following behind your master. How dare you speak to me in such a tone? Do you want to die?" Yun Jian was the chairman of Rongyao Company, so she shouldn't lose her dignity, so my NI was a little scared. She didn't dare to be mad at Yun Jian, so she turned to the Fox. To my NI, since Yun Jian was the chairman, then she, Fox, was just a dog of Rongyao Company. How dare a subordinate be so arrogant to her? My and I, stop talking. Mel saw this and immediately scolded his sister. My and I pouted after being scolded by her brother. Just as she was about to continue speaking, she caught a glimpse of a fair and smooth hand reaching towards her. In the next second, a slap was heard. My and I only felt that her cheek was hit hard and she was sent flying to the ground. When my and I recovered from the pain, she just happened to see the owner of that jade hand standing in front of her. Chapter 10-12. Yun Jian walked closer to Mai and I as she spoke. Seeing his sister get slapped by Yun Jian, Mare was indifferent. That was because a demoness was blocking his way, preventing him from getting close. Yun Jian was already in front of Mai and I. She reached out and pinched my niece's chin. Suddenly, she tightened her grip and spoke to Mai and I in a hair-raising tone. Or, you can replace Hoggy Company and become history. How about that? The words, become history, were like a heavy hammer that slammed into my niece's heart. My niece's heart tightened. You. Mai and I felt an unprecedented fear. Reality proved that she was quite frightened by Yun Jian. Especially when Yun Jian was pinching her chin and speaking to Mai and I with a slight hesitation. Mai and I felt that she had never been so scared in her life. However, just when Mai and I felt that her chin was about to be crushed by Yun Jian suddenly let go. Take your sister and get out of here. Yun Jian kicked Mai and I. Then, she turned her head. The young girl's beautiful face looked neither happy nor angry, but it made Mare's heart tremble. Mare had never seen a young girl like this. Yun Jian was the chairman of Rongyao Company. His Hoggy Company's social status was higher than Yun Jian's Rongyao Company. If Yun Jian was an ordinary businesswoman, she would have probably rushed over to Hoggy Company and asked for peace. But Yun Jian? What did she say? She said that she would make sure that Hoggy Company would never see the light of tomorrow? Was this something that an underage girl would say? Alright, Mare admitted that Yun Jian was not an ordinary person. If Yun Jian was an ordinary person, then were there any geniuses in this world? Just as Mare thought of this, he was already holding his sister's hand. Mai and I had been spoiled since she was a child. Yun Jian's slap just now had completely stunned Mai and I. Mare had just helped his sister Mai and I to her feet, and was planning to leave this place first before coming back to find the demoness. Yun Jian's leisurely voice came from the back of his head again. Tell Matt that if he doesn't want to disappear in the long river of history, he'd better behave himself. If he dares to lay his hands on my Rongyao Company again, he'd better wash his neck and wait for death. Matt was Mare and my niece's father, and Matt was also the chairman of the Hoggy Company. Mare had indeed used his status as the president to suppress Rongyao Company because of the siren, but it was just a superficial suppression. Yun Jian might be in Longmen City, but in reality, the slightest movement among the international bigwigs could not escape her eyes. Yun Jian was also well aware that the person who was stirring up trouble in Rongyao Company was not Mare, but his father, Matt. Matt's motive was obvious as well. He wanted to take over Rongyao Company for himself. Mare paused but left in a hurry with his sister Mai and I. Today was definitely the most pathetic day of Mare and my niece's lives. Watching Mare and Mai and I leave in a hurry, the few employees who were still working overtime in Rongyao Company were dumbfounded. Especially Yun Jian's arrogant words just now. Rongyao Company might be inferior to Hoggy Company in terms of capital, but Yun Jian had asked Mare to pass the message to Hoggy Company's chairman, Matt, with such arrogant words. If he dared to do anything else, he'd better wash his neck and wait for death. Chapter 10-13. It was not my niece's first time wreaking havoc in Rongyao Company. The last few times Mare and Mai and I came, Mare simply wanted to see a luring demon. Mai and I, on the other hand, was here to pick a fight. Therefore, when no one picked a fight with her, Mai and I came to the employees and humiliated them. Even so, the employees dared not make a sound. She was the daughter of Hoggy Company's chairman after all. Who would dare to go against her? unless they were not afraid of losing their jobs. Therefore, the few staff members present were usually very unwilling to see my Ai. At the same time, they were extremely disgusted with her. They just did not say it out loud. In spite of it, they nearly ran over to clap and cheer when they saw how Yunjian thrashed my Ai just now. In spite of it, Yunjian's domineering image was deeply imprinted in their minds. If anyone mentioned Rongyao Company's chairman next time, they would introduce him to them proudly, telling them how cool and amazing their chairman was. While the employees were still admiring Yunjian was already walking on the main road of Maryland with Alluring Demon and Fox. We finally got rid of that annoying mare and gave that little B*tch my Ai a good thrashing. Sister Jian, to thank you for your great feat just now, I'll treat both of you to supper. Alluring Demon patted Fox's shoulder and guffawed at Yunjian. Let's go. Yunjian narrowed her eyes. Then, the three of them went to the busiest nightclub in Maryland in Country M. Alluring Demon ordered generously. When the dishes were served, Alluring Demon and Fox reported Rongyao Company's recent situation to Yunjian. Yunjian's eyes narrowed as she listened. It was 1:00 in the morning when they were done with supper. Guxian, Dan Tiansheng, and the others had finished watching the race and rushed over after receiving Yunjian's call. During the 3-day Labor Day holiday, Guxian brought Yunjian to Country M to watch the race. After spending a night in a hotel in Maryland, Yunjian bought a plane ticket back to China the next day. Before she left, she also sent an invitation to Siren and Vixen, inviting them to attend the wedding of her mother, Qin Yiru, and Gu Junjian on May 21st. At the same time, Yunjian also sent out a lot of invitations, using the name of Kosha mercenaries to invite many international big shots to Qin Yiru's wedding. Of course, for now, everything was being done in secret. Yunjian returned to Longmen City alone. Guxian had already returned to school, so he sent Yunjian to the airport and watched Yunjian board the plane before leaving. Yunjian got off the plane at a place called Yang City near Longmen City. It was already noon when she got off the plane and took a car back to Longmen City. Just as she reached home, Yunjian saw a tall silhouette standing at the door. It had been a few days since she last saw Ce. When Yunjian saw Ce, she ran over with a smile. Like a teenage girl, her heart skipped a beat as she threw herself into Ce's arms. Qin Yiru was not at home. She must have gone to chat with Mrs. Yang. Just as Ce pulled the girl into his arms and was about to speak with his magnetic voice, he was interrupted by one of the three heads that popped down the stairs. Wow, Ce Gidge is snatching a girl in broad daylight. Shame on you. Chapter 10:14. Xiao Yunju shook his head as he spoke, as if he was reciting an ancient poem. Xiao Yunju had already started his first grade, so he had a budding understanding of some things. Of course, Xiao Yunju did not know where to use the phrase, snatching a girl. It was only because he had learned these words in the past few days that Xiao Yunju was able to use them. Children were often the most innocent when they were not in school, but once they stayed in school for a long time, they would naturally understand some things. However, not long after Xiao Yunju spoke, the mischievous Duanli interrupted, No, that's not the right word. Duanli even cleared her throat as she spoke. She had completely turned into a little teacher, and then said very seriously, It should be like this. Ahem. In broad daylight, under the clear sky, Big Brother Ce hugged Big Sister Yunjian, who had just returned home, and did something shameful. Xiao Yunju's words might not have caused such a big misunderstanding, but Duanli's words made people's imaginations run wild. Originally, when Yunjian had jumped into his arms, Ce had, of course, hugged her symbolically. How could he not hug the woman he loved when she jumped into his arms? But sure, Duanli's words. Did she mean that he was hugging Yunjian and doing something shameful? Xiao Yunju and Duanli were completely misled by the new words that the school teacher had taught them. Yunjian and Ce stood at the door, but they could clearly hear the conversation between two of the three little heads that poked their heads downstairs. Yunjian's cheeks immediately turned red. Siyi's face also darkened. Being caught by Xiao Yunzhu and the other two, Yun Jian had a feeling that she would be teaching the children wrong things. Thus, just as she was about to squirm out of Siyi's arms, she was pressed back down by Siyi. "You three, come down." Siyi didn't turn around. He maintained his position of hugging Yun Jian as he spoke to the three little heads poking out from upstairs. Towards Xiao Yunzhu and the other two, Siyi had never spoken in an angry tone. Therefore, Xiao Yunzhu and the other two subconsciously believed that their big brother Siyi had the best temper. He seemed to be having fun again. Children were very naughty. Xiao Yunzhu was also a boy. Of course, he was also naughty. Duanli also had a lively personality, so when she heard Siyi's slightly gloomy voice, Xiao Yunzhu and the other two started to hide, as if they were about to be caught by Siyi. They kept shouting with all their might, "Wow! Big brother Siyi is going to snatch the kids. Big brother Siyi is going to catch us. We're rocks that don't move. Big brother Siyi can't see us." Xiao Yunzhu was having so much fun that he was sweating profusely. However, Yun Jian, who was standing downstairs, felt a little awkward. However, nestling in Siyi's arms made her feel at ease. It was as if she had really returned home and didn't have to worry about anything else. Yun Jian's lips curled into a smile as she hugged Siyi with her arms wrapped around him, pressing her body tightly against him. "Your mom went out. Adam and the others also went out. There's only the two of us at home and the three upstairs." When he mentioned the three upstairs, Siyi recalled the scene just now and his face darkened. "Okay." Yun Jian nodded. Then, she wanted to withdraw from Siyi's arms. She said, "It's already noon. You guys haven't eaten yet, right? Let's take Xiao Yunzhu and the other two out for lunch." Yun Jian wanted to squirm out of Siyi's arms, but Siyi pressed her back into his arms. "Adam's injuries have already recovered," Siyi said again. Yun Jian felt a little strange. Why was he so talkative today? In spite of it, Yun Jian did not see the smirk on Siyi's lips. The girl's front was pressed against him. A certain twin peaks were pressed tightly against his chest. He could even feel the girl's fullness through his thin clothes. Chapter 10-15. Yun Jian's face was pressed against Siyi's chest and her head was just touching Siyi's chin. If she didn't look up, she wouldn't be able to see Siyi's slightly curved lips. Although she was a little suspicious, she just pursed her lips and listened to Siyi's nonsense in the end. Yun Jian was still puzzled. Why was Siyi, who had never said a word of nonsense before, talking non-stop like a chatterbox today? Coincidentally, Yun Jian responded to Siyi again. Then, she glanced at a clock not far away. She saw that the hour and minute hands were pointing at noon. She interrupted Siyi, who was still talking nonsense. "Let's take Xiao Zhu and the rest for lunch. I'm a little hungry too." As she spoke, Yun Jian gently stroked her flat tummy. Siyi felt his heart overflow when he heard the girl's soft voice. He didn't even know when he agreed to Yun Jian's request. "Okay." As soon as he finished speaking, he let go of Yun Jian's alluring body. Then, he held Yun Jian's hand and walked upstairs. Xiao Yunzhu and the other two really thought that Siyi was going to play hide-and-seek with them. Their laughter spread to every corner of the villa. However, when it came to Siyi, he caught Xiao Yunzhu and the other two almost instantly and brought them downstairs as if they were chickens. Seeing that Xiao Yunzhu, Duanli, and Duanya were sweating profusely from playing, Yun Jian even used a towel to wipe their sweat. Then, Yun Jian held Duanli and Duanya's hands. Ce extended his slender hand and let Xiao Yunzhu drag him away. Only then did the five of them leisurely walk towards the restaurant. Xiao Yunzhu, Duanli, and Duanya each ordered their favorite dishes. Then, Yun Jian ordered 4 more dishes. 7 dishes, 4 meat and 3 vegetables. Xiao Yunzhu, Duanli, and Duanya ate until their faces were covered in gravy. Eat slowly, Yun Jian said softly as she scraped the rice stuck to Xiao Yunju's mouth. Xiao Yunju and the other two weren't wolfing down the food because they were hungry. They were competing to see who could eat faster and who could grab more food. Therefore, they didn't even have time to talk. A child's pleasure was nothing more than these few points. Snatching food from their friends was the most delicious food. However, if it was really a world-class delicacy, no matter how delicious the food was, they would lose their appetite if they didn't have children to fight with. Because she knew from Ce that Qin Yiru and Mrs. Yang went shopping, Qin Yiru also knew that Ce was a responsible child. Therefore, she was relieved to leave Xiao Yunju and the other two in Ce's care. Qin Yiru would probably come back at night. With this in mind, Yun Jian thought of taking Xiao Yunju and the other two out to play in the afternoon. Xiao Zhu, is there anywhere you want to go? Big sister and big brother Ce will take the three of you out to play in the afternoon, Yun Jian said with a smile as she rubbed Xiao Yunju and the other two's heads. At this moment, Yun Jian's smile was the most sincere. At this moment, the smile on her face was from the bottom of her heart. The amusement park. We're going to the amusement park that we went to last time. Xiao Yunju immediately said to Yun Jian. At the same time, he had a look of anticipation on his face. She then tried to catch up with the boys and girls who jumped over the railing and cut in line. Duan Li's frail body contorted from the girl's stomp. She curled up on the ground, tears falling from her eyes from the pain. Chestnut, what's wrong with you? Xiao Yunju reacted the fastest, squeezing to Duan Li to check where she was hurt. Seeing that the girl was about to leave, Yun Jian lowered her gaze. She suddenly grabbed the girl's wrist when she was about to move forward with the surrounding passengers. Little girl, we won't say anything about you cutting the queue just now, but it's a little unreasonable for you to not apologize after stepping on someone's sister, isn't it? There was a tall and plump young man with a beer belly who stood at the front of the line. He saw what happened just now and spoke to the girl on Yun Jian's behalf. Before the young man could finish, however, the girl cut him off. F***ck off, fatty. It's none of your business. As she spoke, she turned back to look at Yun Jian. Are you letting go or not? If you don't let go, I'll ask my friends to catch you and beat you up, do you believe me? Chapter 10:18. The girl was stunned. Just as she was about to speak, she was attracted by the voices of a few young men and women who were squeezing their way to the front. Yang Kaidai, what are you doing? Why aren't you coming over? One of the boys, who was taller than the rest, bellowed when he saw the girl who was held back by Yun Jian. Obviously, this girl's name was Yang Kaidai. Yang Kaidai became even more frustrated after being yelled at by the boy. Her friends had already cut the queue and ran to the front, but she was being held back by Yun Jian and could not catch up with her friends. Moreover, one bumper car could seat two people. Yang Kaidai sat in the same car with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was a real hooligan. She was so anxious to catch up with him because she wanted to sit in the same bumper car as him. In the end, Yun Jian wanted her to apologize. Yang Kaidai thought that she was a person with a lot of self-respect, especially after she met her current boyfriend and made friends with many gangsters. She felt that she was very arrogant. Yang Kaidai felt that it was impossible for her to apologize to Yun Jian. Come over quickly. There's Ibi**tch here who wants me to apologize. Damn it. I haven't done anything to her yet. Yang Kaidai was getting more and more frustrated as she was surrounded by people in the queue. She shouted at her friends who had already run to the front. Upon hearing Yang Katie's shout, her friends who had already cut the queue all ran back. Yun Jian was standing in front with Duan Li and Duanya, while Ce was standing behind her. Although Ce was tall, he deliberately bent his body and leaned slightly against Yun Jian. That was why Yang Kaidai did not see Ce. At this moment, young Katie's friends had already run back and jumped over the railing one by one. They surrounded Yunjian and the people in the queue as if they were going to fight. F***ck. Little girl, you look pretty. Are you trying to bully my girlfriend? Standing outside the railing, a hooligan-like boy raised his head and pointed his chin at Yunjian as he spoke arrogantly. This boy was obviously young Katie's hooligan boyfriend. However, as soon as the boy appeared, he stared at Yunjian without blinking. That expression was very unusual. Seeing this, Ce stood behind Yunjian and hugged her slender waist from behind. You're not going to apologize, are you? Yunjian's tone was cold. She narrowed her eyes, but the atmosphere around her had changed. Looking at Yunjian's cold expression, young Katie's boyfriend felt an itch in his heart. Yunjian's current appearance was like a cold little beauty. At this moment, Yu Hui felt a certain part of his body swell up. He even felt that his girlfriend, Yang Kai-dai, was tasteless. Hey, little beauty, you seem to have quite a temper. Yu Hui said as he looked at Yunjian with a sneaky smile. However, just as he finished speaking, Yunjian reached out and pulled young Katie's body. Her other hand slapped young Katie's cheek fiercely. Slap. Yunjian slapped Yang Kai-dai so hard that she leaned against the railing. Before Yang Kai-dai could explode, Yunjian stretched out her leg and stepped on Yang Katie's foot. In the next second, Yang Kai-dai screamed like a pig being slaughtered. For a moment, she did not even have time to scold Yunjian. Yunjian stepped on Yang Katie's foot with one foot. She stomped on Yang Katie's foot fiercely as she tossed and turned. Chapter 10:19. She paused for a while. Looks like you're enjoying it. Yunjian added. She increased her strength, and at the same time, her whole body was almost on top of Yang Katie's feet. Yang Kai-dai was an adult, so of course, she wouldn't be willing to be stepped on by Yunjian like this. She struggled with all her might, but Yunjian slapped her every time she struggled. This scene shocked everyone in the queue, and at the same time, Yu Hui and the rest were scared silly. No one expected Yunjian to be so ferocious. Most importantly, Yunjian looked thin and frail, but her current look was enough to make her look like a real woman. Not to mention whether Yang Kai-dai could beat Yunjian, Yang Kai-dai couldn't even reach out to touch the corner of Yunjian's clothes. Yunjian stepped on Yang Katie's feet, and the weight of her whole body was exerted on Yang Katie's feet. Yang Katie's face instantly turned red, and she was in a state where she couldn't bear the pain anymore. Ah! Yu Hui, hurry up and drag this damn woman out. Save me. Yang Kai-dai couldn't beat Yunjian, so she waved her arms wildly, trying to grab Yunjian's hair and tear it apart by force. However, Yunjian didn't let her do as she wished. Whenever Yang Kai-dai wanted to reach out, Yunjian would directly give her a fiery slap in this narrow space, causing Yang Katie's whole body to twitch. Yu Hui and his brothers were dumbfounded by what they saw. Don't girls usually like to pull hair when they fight? Why did it feel different when it came to Yunjian? When Yunjian hit Yang Kai-dai, Ce protected Xiao Yunju, Duanli, and Duanya behind her, and at the same time, didn't let Xiao Yunju and the rest see this scene. F***ck, little beauty, what are you doing? Hurry up and let go of my girlfriend's hand, don't force me to hit you. Yu Hui saw that his girlfriend was being bullied by Yunjian, and he wanted to do something, but he considered that Yunjian was a girl. Most importantly, Yunjian was much prettier than his girlfriend. Yu Hui felt that he really liked Yunjian, and he felt that he wanted to dump his girlfriend and get to know Yunjian. However, if he didn't save his girlfriend, Yu Hui felt that he would leave a bad impression with Yunjian. If he didn't even save his girlfriend, Yu Hui subconsciously thought that he would leave a bad impression in the hearts of girls. Wanting to act like a man in front of Yunjian, Yu Hui went to Yunjian and extended his hand to stop Yunjian from stepping on his girlfriend's foot. Of course, Yu Hui wanted to touch Yunjian's soft and tender body when he pulled Yunjian away. Yunjian naturally felt Yu Hui's thoughts, and Ce, who was standing behind Yunjian, was naturally very sensitive to Yu Hui's actions as he was also a man. Just as Yu Hui was about to approach Yun Jian, Ce, who was standing behind Yun Jian, helped Xiao Yunju and the other two settle down. He didn't even bother holding onto the railing. He lifted his long leg and stepped on the railing with one foot, jumping over the railing from the long queue. That wasn't all. Ce lifted his leg quickly, and after he jumped over the railing, he put both his hands into his trouser pockets, and without even using his hands, he kicked Yu Hui, who was about to reach out to Yun Jian. Yu Hui was sent flying by Ce's swift and fierce kick. With a loud bang, he fell to the ground, and Yu Hui felt that his internal organs were about to be shattered. Chapter 10:20. Yu Hui clutched his internal organs. He felt as if his internal organs were about to be crushed by Ce's kick. This feeling was worse than death. Cough, cough, cough. Yu Hui clutched his chest and coughed violently. Jumping over the railing meant that they weren't in the queue. Amusement parks would usually set up a long queue railing. Outside the railing, there was a flat area where there was no need to queue. Yu Hui and his group had jumped over the railing to run back to help Yang Kai-dai just now. Ce had also jumped over the railing and kicked away Yu Hui, who wanted to touch Yun Jian. Yun Jian's eyes dimmed slightly before her lips curled up. At this moment, she felt warmth in her heart. Because he was behind her. Slap. Thinking of Duan Li's feet that hadn't recovered yet, Yun Jian gave Yang Kai-dai another slap. Duan Li was only a child to begin with. She was still young and was still growing. Places like the back of her feet were tender and tender to begin with. Even Yun Jian's feet were soft and tender, let alone Duan Li. So when she thought of what Yang Kai-dai did to Duan Li and refused to apologize, she gave Yang Kai-dai a few more slaps without hesitation. In the end, Yun Jian grabbed Yang Katie's hair and pulled Yang Katie's head in front of her. She didn't let go of Yang Katie's foot. Are you going to apologize or not? Yun Jian said and gave Yang Kai-dai another slap. In fact, Yun Jian was already very soft-hearted. According to her character in her previous life, Yang Kai-dai would have already been killed. But now that they were in the amusement park, she didn't want to cause a big commotion. However, to an ordinary person, Yun Jian's action was quite shocking. If it was any other ordinary person, even if they saw their own people being stepped on by someone else and were rejected when they asked for an apology, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Even if the other party was as confident as Yang Kai-dai, they could only give up. What else could they do? He could only admit that he was unlucky. After all, Yun Jian had beaten, scolded, and even asked for an apology. If it were an ordinary person, who would dare to do that? Not only was this an action that could easily cause trouble, but more importantly, to hit a person in front of so many people, even an ordinary person would feel embarrassed. Especially for girls, they had to pay attention to their image. Who would be like Yun Jian? Who would be so unscrupulous? Not to mention whether ordinary people could have the same strength as Yun Jian. I apologize, I apologize. Ah. Please let me go. Ouch, 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 it hurts. Yang Katie's hands were held by Yun Jian as she pulled her hair over mercilessly. She was in so much pain that she broke out in cold sweat. How arrogant she was just now was how weak she was now. Yang Katie's entire body was trembling violently. At this moment, even the tourists standing around felt a trace of fear. How could such a young girl do things in such a cruel way? I didn't hear it. Just when everyone present thought that Yun Jian would let go after hearing the apology, they heard Yun Jian's cold voice again. The next moment, following Yun Jian's cold voice was a crisp slap. Yun Jian gave Yang Kai-dai another slap. At the same time, she raised her voice, and her tone was even more arrogant that couldn't be ignored. If you don't apologize to me, I will break your leg. Only then did Yang Kai-dai know fear, and her whole body was trembling. At this moment, Yang Katie's heart was roaring. She is the devil. She is the devil. Chapter 10:21. She had clearly apologized. She had already apologized. But what did Yunjian say? She said she didn't hear it? Could it be that because she said it too lightly, Yunjian didn't mean it? Yang Kaidai couldn't help but curse in her heart. How could there be such an unreasonable person in this world? Wasn't Yunjian lying to her? But Yang Kaidai forgot. While she was thinking about it, she seemed to have forgotten something. How did she treat Yunjian just now? How unreasonable was she when she didn't admit what she did to Duanli? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please let me go. Let me go. Yang Kaidai begged desperately. For a girl like Yang Kaidai, she was arrogant because she had a boyfriend. Yu Hui was a gangster and knew quite a lot of gangsters. He often fought with others and even liked to call a group of friends who called themselves brothers. Whenever one of their buddies got into a little bit of trouble with someone else, this group of buddies would all come. Even if it was just a little bit of trouble, they would make it sound like a big deal. Then, a large group of people would band together to fight. Yu Hui often did this kind of thing. Of course, this wasn't considered a gang fight. If one really had to talk about it, wasn't a guy like Yu Hui just trying to find some sense of presence in front of girls? Gang fights, after gang fights, what was it for? To run in front of girls to show off. But what about girls? Some girls had never been exposed to such things. Then, when they heard a guy like Yu Hui exaggerating and saying that he was as powerful as Superman, they really thought that guys were omnipotent. However, girls like Yang Kaidai naturally fell in love with Yu Hui. She was even tricked by Yu Hui into thinking that Yu Hui and this group of people were omnipotent. But in the end, if she really met someone like Yunjian, without the help of her boyfriend, Yu Hui, Yang Kaidai would probably beg Yunjian to let her go. This time, Yang Kaidai really screamed and begged Yunjian to let her go. She was afraid that Yunjian would say, "I didn't hear you," again. When Yang Kaidai realized that her boyfriend wasn't as powerful as he said, Yang Kaidai could only beg Yunjian to let her go. Yunjian only smiled coldly. Then, she swung her hand and let go of Yang Katie's hand. She didn't plan to continue to hit Yang Kaidai. After Yunjian let go of her hands and legs, Yang Kaidai felt like she was reborn. She was so scared that she crawled along the railing like she was avoiding the plague. Yu Hui's legs kicks leg. As for the rest of them, they didn't dare to come up to Yunjian and see. In the end, Yang Katie's group didn't even bother with the bumper cars anymore. They all ran away like a puff of smoke. Yay! Sister and Ce Gij beat the bad guys. Xiao Yinju's cute little hands held on to Duanli as he shouted. The surrounding crowd was shocked by Yunjian and Ce's skills. After that, Yunjian and Ce brought Xiao Yunju and the other two to line up as usual. Yunjian also carefully checked Duanli's leg. Seeing that there was a black patch, Yunjian carried Duanli. Although Duanli's leg hurt, she didn't want to go home. Chapter 1022. Duanli was carried by Yunjian. Duanli was very light, as if she had no flesh on her body. Therefore, Yunjian didn't feel tired at all. Duanli had 2 ponytails today and looked very cute. When Yunjian carried her, the ponytails would gently touch Yunjian's skin. However, Yunjian didn't have any expression of disgust. Instead, she pursed her lips and smiled gently. Ce flipped over the railing and stood behind her. "Young lady, your boyfriend was so handsome just now." When Yang Kaidai stepped on Duanli's foot and wanted to leave without apologizing, the surrounding people were all watching the show. Only this young man with a beer belly spoke up for Yunjian. Now that he saw Yunjian and Ce, this young man couldn't help but say to Yunjian. This young man with a beer belly was a typical fat man, and his body looked rather burly. He didn't have any other intentions, he just wanted to say something to Yunjian. Yunjian also admired people like him who were willing to help others when they met on the road. When the young man with a beer belly finished speaking, Yunjian nodded and smiled at him, but didn't say anything. Yunjian's smile was a tacit agreement to the young man with a beer belly. Ce was her boyfriend. The young man with a beer belly seemed to have no one to talk to, so he looked at Duanli, who was in Yunjian's arms, Duanya, and Xiao Yunju, who was being held by Ce. The young man with a beer belly couldn't help but ridicule them. "You guys look so young, especially you, young lady. I think you look like a 16 or 17-year-old girl. If I didn't see these 3 kids, I would have thought that you two were a couple from school." The beer-bellied young man obviously didn't believe that Xiao Yunju and the other 2 were Yunjian and Ce. Some people didn't look old. Although Yunjian and Ce looked young, the beer-bellied youth felt that they were old. Usually, when a young couple went on a date or went on a trip, it was impossible for them to bring their younger siblings along, right? If she were to bring her younger siblings along, their parents would have to come along as well, right? Although he couldn't believe it, the beer-bellied young man would rather think in another direction than think in this direction. Yunjian was stunned when she heard the beer-bellied young man's voice. She was about to say something when the young man interrupted her. However, Ce snatched the right to speak. "It's not good to keep the child cooped up at home. You should take some time to bring the child out for a walk." This meant that he had tacitly agreed with the beer-bellied youth's words. The corners of Yunjian's mouth twitched. She wanted to explain again, but Ce hugged her slender waist and looked at her lovingly. He said, "Stop fooling around. Hold the child tight." Yunjian was speechless. She could even feel the naked gazes of the people around her. "Ha ha ha. I can tell that you two have a good relationship." The beer-bellied youth believed Ce's words without a doubt. At the same time, he changed from calling Yunjian and Ce a couple to calling them husband and wife. Xiao Yunju and Duanli looked younger. Whether it was Xiao Yunju, Duanli, or Duanya, they were thin and weak. They looked like kindergartners. In comparison, Xiao Yunju had grown taller and looked much better. However, he looked like he was 6 or 7 years old at most. If Yunjian and Ce looked older, then it wasn't too unbelievable that they had given birth to Xiao Yunju and the other 2 at an early age. The beer-bellied man smiled. "Very good." Ce only revealed a charming smile. It was easy for Ce to say something that went against his conscience. Chapter 10:23. In the end, Ce actually started chatting with the beer-bellied young man. However, from the beginning to the end, Ce was flaunting his relationship with Yunjian. In Ce's own words, he couldn't wait for the whole world to know that Yunjian already belonged to him and only him. He absolutely wouldn't allow anyone to have any designs on Yunjian. The long line actually passed by very quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was Yunjian's turn. Because he still had Duanya with him, Ce didn't plan to play bumper cars like the other kids. A bumper car could only seat 2 people, so Yunjian and Duanya sat in the same car. Xiao Yunju and Duanli were already starting to understand things, so Yunjian didn't have to worry about them sitting in the same car. Ce stood by the side and watched as Yunjian, Xiao Yunju, and Duanli sat in the same car. They were having a lot of fun. Seeing Yunjian pursing her lips and feeling happy from the bottom of her heart, Ce also felt happy. He stared at Yunjian the whole time. Even the middle-aged aunties in the line could feel the love in his eyes. Xiao Yunju and the other 2 loved to play bumper cars. Some of the dangerous games in the amusement park weren't suitable for Xiao Yunju and the other 2, so Xiao Yunju and the other 2 dragged Yunjian along and immersed themselves in the bumper cars game for the whole afternoon. After playing once, they dragged Yunjian and Ce to line up for the second time. As a result, they didn't feel tired at all. When it was time for dinner, Yunjian and Ce brought Xiao Yunju and the other 2 to a restaurant in the amusement park to order dinner. The dishes in the amusement park were generally more expensive than those outside, but even so, Yunjian ordered a lot of dishes. During dinner, Yunjian sent a text message to Qin Yiru, telling her that she, Ce, and Xiao Yunju would not be home for dinner tonight. Labor Day was a 3-day holiday. Today was supposed to be the last day of Labor Day, so there should be evening self-study at night. However, the weather forecast said that the weather would not be good on the last day of Labor Day, and it happened to be a holiday, so the evening self-study was cancelled. Of course, no one expected the weather to be so sunny today. In this era, it was common for the weather forecast to be wrong. Jejia, let's go boating after eating, okay? Yunju asked Duanli and Duanya as he gobbled up the rice in his bowl. Okay. Yunjian rubbed Xiao Yunju's head. She felt that her brother was getting cuter and cuter. After dinner, the sky had already darkened. Night quickly shrouded the sky and the amusement park was soon illuminated by neon lights. There were still many people playing in the amusement park. Of course, the boats by the creek were still sailing. It was just that the boats here were charged. Yunjian knew that as well. CE had just paid for an hour's ride on the pedals. Yunjian was just about to step onto the boat with Xiao Yunju and the other two. However, at this moment, she unconsciously saw a familiar face not far away. The familiar person was graceful and elegant. She was holding a boy who was about the same age as Xiao Yunju. They were surrounded by a group of people as they walked over. When she saw the graceful and elegant woman, Yunjian's eyes immediately locked. How did she meet Guxian's biological mother, Huayun, here? Just as she was thinking this, Huayun also saw Yunjian. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.